Welcome to Hustle and Flow with Heather Hubbard, episode number 8. Hi, I'm Heather Hubbard, and I was a litigator, partner, and practice group leader at an AmLaw 200 firm. I know what it takes to rise to the top. I also know all too well the toll it can take on your personal life. So how do you shine bright without burning out? How do you embrace your ambition without selling your soul? You're listening to the Hustle and Flow podcast. Hello and welcome back. I am your host, Heather Hubbard. Thank you so much for joining me today. We are going to talk about when saying yes means saying no. What? Yes means no? The first time I heard of this concept, my mind was blown. I had always considered myself to be a bit of a yes man. I found it hard to say no to anyone. So what I mean by that is any opportunity that would come along. If someone asked me to volunteer for an organization or a board, or to be involved on a committee, or to do anything honestly non-billable in my firm, any request, whether it was a friend or a family, or if it was work related or in the community, I would say yes. I would ask, how may I help? How may I be of service? I am here to show up. And so I had shared that I was a people pleaser. I was a yes woman. And someone said back to me, well, you do realize that even though you're saying yes to all of these people and all of these things, you are also saying no to just as many other people and things. And I was like, what? Made me scratch my head a little bit. I wasn't quite clear on what that meant. And now it is a leading principle in my life and something I share because this is super powerful. If you struggle with saying no, or if you feel guilty when you say no, listen up. You are going to love this episode. Once you realize that for every yes, there is at least one other no, it gives you permission to make better choices, to make better decisions. And when you first start trying this on for size, if you're one of those people that feel guilty, you're probably going to experience even more guilt initially, but you will get through it. And then it starts to be freeing and you realize that you're actually helping others out by being more intentional with your yeses and your nos. Okay, let's break all of this down. I think we can all agree that we only have a finite amount of time each and every day. We can't really add to that. Now, we can do a better job of managing our priorities and our energy so that it frees us up to focus on what matters most to us. But there are only so many hours in each and every day. 24 to be exact. And how you split that up doesn't really matter. You're not going to get more time. Now, even though you only have a finite amount of time each day, you have infinite options on how to fill that time. So every single minute, every single hour that you spend on one thing means that you can't spend it on another. Okay, so we can probably all understand and appreciate that concept. It's one of the reasons why so many of us complain that there's not enough time in the day. We get this concept that we can only do so much. But what we often fail to realize is that we don't have to do it all. How many of you try to be everything to everyone? I mean, I know I do. It's something that I am much better at, but it is still an ongoing issue that I have to be aware of and stay on top of. I want to be an amazing business person. You probably want to be an amazing attorney. I want to be an amazing wife. I want to be an amazing friend and family member. I want to be an important part of my community here in Nashville. I want to serve and volunteer. I want to be politically active. I want to be part of bar associations. And the list goes on and on and on, right? Most people might add to that something to do with church or their children, maybe sports organizations or other hobbies that you're passionate about and involved in. And then I also really want to take care of myself mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. I want to spend time taking care of myself. And once you take all of that into account, you're hard pressed to fit everything in, let alone the things that you have to do, like going to the grocery or buying clothes occasionally so you're not completely outdated, or just doing things around the house. Even if you're not doing it yourself, you're having to schedule the maintenance. There's always a million things to do. And you cannot say yes to all of it. And you certainly can't do all of it well. So one thing to consider is how you're focusing your priorities. And if you missed episode number 3, we talked about the priority matrix and taking back your day. So if you missed that episode, if you struggle with putting out fires all day long and never really getting to focus on the most important and meaningful things, I really encourage you to go back after this episode and listen to episode number 3. I think it will really help you with identifying what are priorities and what are things that you can try to start avoiding by delegating or completely pushing off. But again, you can go check out episode 3 for that. We're not going to talk about that here today. We're not talking about priorities. What we're really talking about is more of just an awareness that there is always a trade-off. And I think most of us know that we can't have it all, right? There's the saying, well, you can have it all, just not all at once. But that's really more of a big picture concept. I think we think of that more in life stages. But how do you deal with that on a day-to-day basis or a weekly basis or a monthly basis? That's where I think we tend to really forget about this concept of yes meaning no. So let's just walk through an example. Let's assume that there is some type of networking opportunity. So I want you to put this in context in your life, in your career. So this might be a bar organization event. It might be some other type of association event. Maybe it's a firm event or a company event, but it's not mandatory. You don't have to do it, but there is a networking component, and your first thought is, I should be there, either because it will look good, it's expected of me, or there might be a great opportunity. You might meet someone that is going to be your next client, or maybe the next person that gives you an amazing lead on an even better job opportunity. So you look at your calendar and there's nothing on there. And so you're like, okay, I'm going to go to this event. And you don't even really think about it. You just put it on there. Now, for those of you that are thinking, yeah, I'd never sign up for networking events. Think of something where you do automatically say yes to it without even thinking. As long as the calendar is clear, you're like, got it, writing it down, I will be there. Okay. But for a lot of us, for a lot of attorneys, we attend a lot of networking events, and many of us experience FOMO, fear of missing out. We're always worried that if we don't attend something, that we might miss out on that next amazing opportunity, or we'll just miss out in general. And so, we show up to everything. Now, in that context, your calendar was clear. So when you put it in your calendar, or when you asked your assistant to put it in your calendar, did you stop to wonder what you were saying no to by saying yes to that networking event? This is where it gets really tricky. If there's nothing on your calendar, you're probably not stopping to think about what your other options might be. That looks like blank space to you, and so it doesn't really look like a trade-off. But there's always a trade-off. So think about it. What might you be saying no to? Well, if you didn't have that networking event, what might have you done? Maybe you would have stayed later at work, and so you would be billing hours. Maybe you would have stayed later at work and caught up on some non-billable administrative work. Maybe you would have gone out on a date. Maybe you would have gone to exercise, go to yoga. Maybe you would have had dinner with your family. Maybe you would just be sitting in front of the TV watching The Voice. I don't know. The possibilities are endless, but you probably have an idea of the types of things that you could be doing during the time frame of going to this networking event. And so by saying yes to that networking event, you are saying no to whatever else you could have been doing. Now, if you were just going to be hanging out at home watching TV, and that's not super productive, then maybe going to the networking event is fine. Now, again, in episode 3, I would be encouraging you to make sure that you're not just numbing out to TV on a regular basis, but if that's your self-care time, that matters, that counts. You're saying no to your self-care time in order to say yes to this networking event. I'm not suggesting that the networking event is not something you should go to. You may very well decide that it is important and you want to go. But what I want you to get in the habit of doing is making a conscious decision to go to that networking event after you've considered all of the things that you are saying no to in order to say yes to that. Because in that context, that networking event may not be the way you want to spend your time. And if we don't get into this routine, if we don't get into this habit of stopping and asking ourselves, do we want to say yes? And what are we saying no to? We just do it without thinking. And then we often feel overworked, overwhelmed, burnout, and we don't know why. And part of the why is because we are running around saying yes to a lot of things that don't fill us up. And what should be a priority for us takes a back burner and then ends up becoming an emergency. Again, if you've not listened to episode 3, I encourage you to go back because we talk about that matrix and the priorities and emergencies and all of that. So how in the world do you start trying to become aware of this, right? Because it's easy as we're discussing this topic on a podcast to say, yeah, I get that. That makes sense. But in the moment, how do you stop? How do you catch yourself to make this analysis, to make this decision? Well, you can't just do it. Well, maybe you can. I can't. It generally takes practice. You just have to try to get into the practice of doing it. And the more you do, the easier it becomes. It's like exercise, right? The first few times you start exercising when you're getting into a new routine, it's just terrible and you probably intentionally or unintentionally forget to show up. But after a while, it becomes easier and then you just do it. It's that same concept. And this really goes hand in hand with mindfulness. I am a huge fan of mindfulness. And we're going to talk about these concepts throughout this podcast. I will be doing a bit of a 101 on mindfulness a little bit later. I think we're going to probably cover that in episode 19 if we stick to the schedule. But mindfulness at its most basic foundation is being aware. Now, there's a little bit more to it than that, but for purposes of today, that's really all I want you to take away from that is it's just being aware. Because once you're aware, that's what gives you the space to be able to respond as opposed to react. And when we get these invitations in to go to a networking event or whatever else, if we are automatically saying yes, if our calendar is open, we are reacting. We are not responding, we are reacting. We have become so accustomed to saying yes to certain types of events that we're not stopping to create that space to make the analysis in order to respond. Now, the decision may still be the same. Again, you may decide that you want to go. But it's important that it's your decision, that you're consciously deciding that you want to do that as opposed to something else. So we walked through the networking example, but there are many, many others that come up. And so another one that I brought up early on was nonprofit work and board work. Maybe for you, it's non-billable work. But in an effort to help out, we really are diminishing our reserves. If you're on many different boards or you're doing a lot of community service, there probably comes a point where you're not doing the best you can. You're just going through the motions. So you show up to the meetings, but you're not that engaged. You're not that active because you're completely overwhelmed. You've got so much to do. If there are boards and nonprofits or community organizations where you're not really involved, or maybe you're just not as passionate as you used to be, keep in mind that you are taking away opportunities from others. Now, nonprofits will never tell you that they don't need you. And if you are used to saying yes to everyone, they're going to want you, especially if you do show up and do the work. But you're being exhausted. You're being perhaps resentful. It's not helpful. And there are so many attorneys that would love to have an opportunity to give back. And if you're overcommitted, you might be thinking, really? I mean, I'm involved in all kinds of things. Anyone can get involved. It's actually not that easy. Getting on a nonprofit board is something that a lot of young attorneys really have to struggle to find. And I know plenty of seasoned attorneys who actively try to seek out certain board positions. And by your taking a seat, you're keeping them from having it. And by your showing up and doing all the work, you're keeping others from having an opportunity for them to really flex their muscles and step into a leadership role. You can't be everything to everyone. And when you try to be, either you're probably not doing it very well, or you're keeping others from learning and growing because you're trying to do it for them. Don't take that away from them. When I first started saying no, especially to nonprofits or even non-billable firm activities, I would get pushback, and they would tell me how wonderful I was and how much I was needed and wanted. And again, this is where you need awareness and you need space so that you can respond and not react. If it's really hard to just say no after they've told you how wonderful you are, and you're starting to feel guilty and bad. One thing that you can do, you don't have to do this, but if it makes you feel better, think of someone that you're mentoring or someone else in the community that you think would enjoy the opportunity and say, I have someone in mind that I think would actually do a great job for you and would have more time to commit. And I think they would be perfect for the job. Would you like me to make an introduction? I did that early on. I don't do that now. I just say no. But when you feel guilty for saying no, initially, you can make that introduction. And I will tell you, the younger attorneys or the others that are looking for those opportunities, they are so grateful that you brought them in and that you made that introduction and gave them that opportunity. So you can always keep that in mind. And then you feel good because you're helping someone else out. I could literally go on and on with examples. There's no need to do that, but I will just share a few others. We're not going to go through the full analysis, but I do want you to recognize how this applies to so many different things. One could be coffees or lunches or dinners. I have found that lunches are really disruptive to my schedule. So by the time I drive to lunch, I have lunch, I drive back, I have lost a lot of time. So I may have enjoyed catching up with whoever I was talking to, but if I lose 2 hours in my day to lunch, when I could have been spending it being super productive at work, and then that makes me work later, and it keeps me from doing self-care or spending time with my family, well, then I realize, actually, if I'm choosing between the two, I would rather not have lunch. And so I very rarely have lunch these days, and I have to say no to people when they reach out and say, can we have lunch? And I feel terrible, but when I stop and consider that saying yes to them in that lunch means saying no to my self-care and my family, it makes it much easier to have that conversation and to say no and to say, let's jump on the phone or let's grab coffee at the very beginning of the day. That's just another example. And from the personal side of things, I think I've told you guys before, I don't have kids, but I do have a lot of friends and clients who struggle with going to every single sporting event that their child has, or classroom event, or birthday parties. Your saying yes to all of those things means you were saying no to something else. Maybe it means you're going to have to work later and then you miss some one-on-one time with your child. Or maybe it means that you can't practice some self-care because you are attending another child's birthday. You know the drill. You know what's going on in your life. In that context, things just get a little bit clearer. So when you say, okay, there's nothing on the calendar, we can go to this other kid's birthday party, just stop for a second and say, well, what am I saying no to? And again, if you decide that is the best option, that's the one you want to spend your time doing, then go for it. But if there are other options, it will help you start to flex your muscles and test saying no. Now, part of that is going to require you to have a little bit of resilience and not worry about what others think of you. But you can do it. So one of the things that I try to get in the habit of doing is never saying yes on the spot. So if someone calls me or texts me or I'm just meeting with them in person and they ask me to do something, I never say yes on the spot. I say, I will get back with you, or let me check my calendar, or I'm not sure. But I try to create space. That may only be 5 minutes, but just that short amount of time helps me respond instead of react. And for those activities and events that I know I have a problem saying no with, and they generally end up being a waste of my time or really drain my energy, on those, I basically set at least a 24-hour window to create some space because I know that I'm likely going to make a rash decision as opposed to truly thinking it through. So if you say yes to absolutely everything, or if your calendar is clear and that means it's an automatic yes without stopping to think about what you're saying no to, then I hope that this episode has been helpful, and then you start to take the time to create some space to think about it, to analyze it, to respond instead of react, and realize that your yes also means no. And in that context, it might help you make better decisions when it comes to what you are saying yes and no to. Now, I will mention I have purchased 2 books that I have heard many wonderful things about, and I had hoped to read them before this episode because I assumed that they related. I have not finished them. In fact, I've not even started them, but I want to share them with you, and maybe we can read them together. I'm sure that there's going to be a ton of great advice in there and some other concepts, and then maybe we can come back and do a follow-up episode. So let me tell you about these books. The first is called Year of Yes by Shonda Rhimes. And my understanding is the concept is that you say yes to everything, but in context, it also means you're saying no. So I'm going to read this one, Year of Yes by Shonda Rhimes. I had an attorney at my last retreat share it with the group. She said it was wonderful, and I've now had others in that group read it, and they have told me it is fabulous. So I have it. Read it with me. And the other is Drop the Ball, Achieving More by Doing Less by Tiffany Dufu. So Drop the Ball just came out in February of 2017, so it is brand new, but it is available in hardback, so you can go ahead and grab a copy of that. And then Year of Yes, it's been out for a little bit. It is a New York Times bestseller, and it's available in paperback as well. So if you're interested, read those with me. You can go to hustleandflowpodcast.com/8, and I'll include some links to those books in the show notes. And again, maybe we can then come back and do a follow-up episode based upon those books. All right, that is it for today. Thank you so much for joining me. If you have not yet had an opportunity to leave a review on iTunes, I would be greatly appreciative if you would do so. Rating and reviewing the podcast makes a really big difference in getting the word out to other attorneys that might also enjoy the show and get benefit from it. So if you've enjoyed it, I would greatly appreciate it if you would go rate and review it. Have a great day, and I will see you in the next episode. For show notes, downloads, and other free resources, and to keep the conversation going, head on over to hustleandflowpodcast.com. See you there.